Hello and welcome to our Family Church Online. It's Thursday night and we are here live in Windermere bringing this to you, the new way of doing church. And we're excited that we've had this opportunity to present this to you. You know, as always, we just want to make sure that you know how to connect with us, everything that we have going online. First of all, prayer requests. We know there are so many prayer requests, unique things that people are dealing with, and we want to know because we're your church. We want to pray for you. So if you want to send it to prayer@ourfamily.church, and we'll make sure that it gets into the hands of our prayer team and our pastors, and we'll be praying for you. Also, our children's and our students, you can find all the information on our website, ourfamily.church. And if you click on each of those different areas there, you'll find out what's going on with our children. They're having daily sort of challenges and fun events. And they're also having a Tuesday worship. Our students are meeting on Wednesday on Zoom, and they also have things going on Instagram. So make sure everybody in your family is up to date. And for the adults, we have small groups going on. And so you can find a group that's meeting right now online. And there are many that would welcome you if you're not currently in a group. And you can be a part of that during this time so you're not alone. You have others there that are praying for you also. Well, today we're going to be talking about our fourth purpose, which is beyond. And this one, out of all of our purposes, we've probably changed the most in terms of what its theme is. And we're calling it Beyond Tell Your Story. And as we say that, what we're really trying to emphasize is that we have a story about how Jesus Christ has changed our life and affected us for the better. And that any story really has three parts to it: a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in the beginning, what you find in your own story is that you sort of realize what life was like before Christ, and maybe you were making some mistakes and going down the wrong path. And then in the middle, you meet Christ, and sometimes it's dramatic, and for some people, it's a realization, and they surrender their life to Christ. And then the end of the story is a time when you've realized that you've committed your life to Christ and you're serving him in a new way. And so today we want to emphasize that, and we thought the best way of doing it was having three people here today who have stories and are happy to tell it and share it so that they can reach people beyond themselves with the glory of Jesus Christ. And first up we have here today is Tom Stroop, and Tom's been a good friend for a long time, been coming to our church. He's been with the Orange County Sheriff's Office since 1981. He's retired now, as you can tell. Look how relaxed he is and retired. He's married to Dawn, and he was a SWAT commander. And then he also took a little stab at television. Maybe you could sit here and
No,
I
I was just thinking what a natural
he
you
had
are
a couple
at that.
shows, and they're
Yeah.
actually pretty good. I remember watching them. Stars Earn Stripes.
Yep.
And the other one was School Pride.
Yeah.
And they were great things. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you're continuing to pursue that now in your retirement too.
You know, you talk about beginning, middle, and end. I think I have a beginning, middle, and end every day. I really do.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
it's not a one-time thing.
It's always an adventure.
Yeah,
isn't it?
everything in life is an adventure.
So your own life when it comes to your testimony of Christ, what was the beginning like? Where were you at that point you realized that there was something wrong in your life?
I did not. I wasn't looking. And you know what? That's the thing about God. You call me the other day and you say, Tom, would you mind giving your testimony about how Jesus saved your soul? That's the way I heard it. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, yeah, Jesus did save my soul, but he saved my life also. And so I think a message for me was like, at first I thought, well, who wants to hear that same old story? Jesus saved my soul. I've heard it 100 times, right? But what I realized is that my story is not just about me. We tell our stories because we hope that it affects somebody else,
Right.
and leads them in the same direction to find the same answers you found. I wasn't looking.
Now, how old were you at the time?
So we're going to go there.
Yeah.
I left home at 17. My girlfriend was 15. We both left home. And like I say, I tell this story not to brag or complain, either one. I tell it because I know there's somebody that can relate to it.
Sure.
We got married. I was 18. She was 16. We had a son shortly thereafter. And by the time I was 19, I was working in a rock quarry in Kentucky, high school dropout. My wife worked at a coffee shop nearby, underage, of course, but they hired her. An insurance salesman kept coming by and talking to her and said she wouldn't come by the house. We lived in a company house owned by the rock quarry because it was so close to the quarry that it was condemned because of the blasting had cracked the foundation. So we lived in a company house and cut tobacco on the weekends and worked in a rock quarry during the week. This insurance salesman, George Barnes, never forget him, how can I, would come by and knock on the door. And when he did, I would go in the basement to hide. Basically, like, I don't want to hear this guy. You know, I'm busy, I'm working, I'm tired, I'm whatever. My wife at the time would talk to him. He'd leave. He'd do this a lot. And I'd go in the basement a lot. Well, one day I heard the door slam. I come upstairs, he's standing inside the house. So he had figured it out. So I said, okay, you know, just to know what's up. So
were you talking about insurance or something else?
no, he was not talking. He was talking about life insurance,
Yes,
soul
I see,
insurance. And I knew it. I didn't want to hear it. I was raised Catholic, and you know, I really believed that if I did not kill somebody, I was going to heaven. That was my bottom line. Don't kill anybody, you go to heaven, you're fine, because I was told that. So then I said, okay, I'll go. Youth rally, because I was young at the time. And I walked in the front door, and I walked straight down to the front and just got on my knees and received Christ, because this is what I believe.
What had you heard?
I hadn't heard anything.
You hadn't heard anything?
No. And this is why I think that everybody's hearing something. You don't have to hear it from an insurance salesman. You don't have to hear it from a pastor. You don't have to hear it from me. You are saying yes and no every day to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit's there, whether you are in a church, in your living room, at a rock quarry, hiding in your basement. So when I went in, I hadn't been told anything. The Catholic Church, I'm not bad mouthing the Catholic Church, but it was not a personal relationship to me. It was a corporate relationship.
Yeah, right.
I walked straight up front, and it has not been an easy road. Don't get me wrong. As a matter of fact, I'm since divorced from her. Been remarried, 35 years now to my second wife. Retired from the sheriff's office 32 years. And when I say, God, you asked me to tell a story about God saving my soul, I thought, yeah, God saved my soul. And when I die, there'll be that eternal reward. But there's a reward here. There's a reward now. And the reward here and now is that God gave me his Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And his Holy Spirit tells me yes and no. Now, I can ignore it, but it tells me yes. It tells me to come forward. It tells me to kneel down. It tells me to pray. It tells me to how to live my life. And that's why I say, God save my life being what I'm living right now.
Oh, you're right, the best life insurance you got. No, but I'm just curious, you walk into a situation like that, had you heard anything
No.
like the gospel or nothing? It was just, the Holy Spirit was so pressing on you, you were trying to run from it. And when
Yep.
you took that step to say, I'm going to go to this youth event, and by doing that, that sort of released yourself to God. Wow.
We all have a soul. It's going somewhere.
Yeah.
And whether we say yes or no, it's going to go somewhere. And when you open your heart, open your soul, open your mind, you'll find the truth. The truth is always going to be the same. I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter whether I'm ever a Christian. The truth is still going to be the truth. I could deny Christ tomorrow, and it would still be the same truth, because it's not about me. It's about God. It's about the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I didn't make up the religion. I didn't do anything to earn it. I just received it and accepted it. And that's why I say people that may be looking, they may not be looking. I was not looking, but when I walked in, I recognized what I saw.
Now, there were probably some things going through your mind like, oh, I don't want to accept this because of this or because of this or whatever it might be. What sort of excuses were going through your head to say, don't listen, don't go forward?
Looking back at it now, and even this is still a daily struggle, it's pride. It's like, I don't want to give up control. I was a cop for 32 years. I retired as a SWAT commander. I was on over 3,000 SWAT missions. I was in control. At least I thought I was. I didn't want to give up control. What I realized, I didn't have to give up control. I had to give up my soul. And my soul is my soul is a more personal thing than control. God's in control. Whether we let go or don't let go, he's still in control. He's going to have his way ultimately either way. Yeah. The salvation comes from faith and believing there's something bigger and more powerful and better and smarter than you, that cares for you and loves for you.
And, I like that you said, life wasn't, that minute of surrender, life wasn't perfect.
No.
Right? You still were dealing with sin because you have all these habits and you still have this pride. You got to really sort of shake and begin to think like Christ. And it's very tough to go through that. So if anybody's sort of sitting there going, well, I don't know, I'm not perfect enough and all that. Exactly. That's why you have to surrender. So your story, that's a great story. And of course, where, it's taken you now. I mean, you're obviously a leader. You were a leader in the Orange County Sheriff's Department. You were a leader here at the church and taught, young adults and everything. And so, your story is continuing to evolve. like you said, it's every day
Yep.
there's a new chapter in the story, and that's
Yeah.
what's so exciting about it. Wow, I really appreciate you coming
Yeah,
here
thank
and
you very
sharing
much.
that. So thank
Yeah,
you
it's
very
a
much,
pleasure.
Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Well, next up we have is David Ogden, and another law enforcement person, and he has 30 years of law enforcement experience, and currently he is the chief of police with Windermere. He has 4 kids, and his wife Shelley, and he's a part of Iron Men of God, and he serves in that area with Iron Men of God, and is over at Mosaic. And I think we have a little theme here right now of working with law enforcement people. But you two just came to mind, and I knew you guys were local here, so it was easy for you to come by.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we were just easy and quick or what, but
Well, I know you have a tremendous story. I've always respected you, appreciated you, especially during this crisis we're at. We've been in touch a lot, just making sure that everything is going well here at the church and going well here in Windermere. And so we always appreciate you and your officers, how they, protect us here, and we make sure that we're okay and all that we're doing. And I had you lined up to speak at our men's event, which was supposed to be this Saturday.
this weekend, yeah.
And we were very excited. We had 10 great speakers lined up.
And me.
You were going to be on there. And you, 9, and you. No,
9 and me.
and you. And I had never really knew your story about coming to Christ. You told me it in a text, and I was like, please come and tell us more about this. And so I appreciate you being here. Now, a little bit of your story. You started out. You grew up in a Christian home.
Oh, no, I actually didn't. I
Did
grew
not
up
at
in a
all.
non-Christian home whatsoever, but we were relocated from New York down to Florida. And, remember at that time, busing was going on, and I found myself in a school that wasn't conducive to a good lifestyle, and we found a Christian school that I went to. I actually was the janitor at the Christian school to pay
Really?
my way through school. So I grew up in a non-Christian family whatsoever, but I went to a Christian academic school and had 5 years of training in there. And I watched and learned and looked, but I'm like most other guys, I'm kind of slow to come to things.
Yeah.
And I accepted Christ at the age of 16 years old, but that's not really kind of where my story starts,
No.
because I say I accepted Christ, but I was a Christian in namesake only for many, many years because of some things happened. Similar to Tom's story that we talked about, I wasn't living the Christian lifestyle, and I think I did it more just because the environment I was in, I was going along with the crowd, and I ended up getting married young at 18 years old with my first child. And because of some situations there, not right or wrong or different and not a blame, but I felt, I wasn't really feeling the church and feeling Christ in my life.
Really.
But when the chips went down, in my opinion, the church left me
Oh, really?
and kind of left me behind. So I was a Christian in namesake only, even though, I kind of felt that spirit every once in a while. I'll be honest with you. I kind of pressed forward, and it comes down to me about trust, so I learned not to trust what I thought was God, it was the church, and I learned to trust myself.
Yeah.
If somebody was going to do something or accomplish something, it was going to be me. And I don't think by any means I was a bad guy. I fell into what I call Disney theology. I was a good guy. I was a cop. I was saving lives. I was on a SWAT team. I was doing stuff like that. But, I'm very, very regimented. I write goals and objectives for myself every year. And I had a 5-year strategy and plan. And at 5 years, I hit it. And the next year, and hit it, and hit it, and hit it. And rose to the ranks of captain and director of the Central Florida Intelligence Exchange. And
And God
the
wasn't
sheriff's
really a
office.
part of those plans, were they, right?
He
You had your
wasn't.
plans.
I had
right,
my
for your
plans,
life.
and it intermingled. It kind of came back in and out there. But I'll tell you what really happened. Through the course of my life, I went through a divorce, and it was very tough. And I got remarried and thought my life was back on track. And I'd had 2 children, and we had a child together. So here I'm 40 years old having a child. My wife's younger than me. I'm smart. Married younger. And life was great. We're on the top of the world. We got a house. I got money coming in, and we got a beautiful young child. And the very short version, because there's a very long version of this, about a year later, we noticed something was wrong with our child. And it took a little bit of a while, but about in a year and a half, we finally realized, and we were diagnosed with a rare medical condition called Sandhoff's disease.
I think we have a picture of your son, right? That
Yeah,
picture,
I think you have one of my pictures
Yeah.
when we used to watch football games.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of began our journey, and that's a 4-year journey. So over a course of a 4-year journey, we slowly watched our child die. We became the medical care providers for our child. My wife retired; she took care of him. And I was angry at God. I was mad at God. I was ticked off, to be honest with you. So that kind of began this journey. And my wife, we're completely different because you grieve in different ways. And we were grieving with a live child because he was about to die. She started blogging, doing things like that. But more importantly, she started reading her Bible. And remember, I had biblical training up to the time. And I would go out to the West Orange Trail for long runs because I didn't want her to see me cry or be upset.
Yeah.
And I did those kind of things. And I yelled and screamed and cussed and sweared at God. But it was the beginning of a relationship that I had with him that opened my eyes. And when I came back, my wife would ask me questions. Is our son going to heaven? And I'm like, yes, he's going to heaven. He doesn't have the mental capability. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what am I doing? So at that point in time in my life, I realized one thing. I've been a leader in this community. I've been a leader in SWAT. I've been a leader in all aspects of my life. But I failed miserably at the most important thing, being a spiritual leader of my own family.
Right.
And it was, to be honest with you, it was devastating.
Yeah. The experience of going through that, how long was that sort of tug of war that was going on between you and God?
You know, I think that was a good 2 years till I finally kind of turned over and submitted that, if God's in control, it means that I'm not. And I had to turn it over to him. I couldn't save my son. But my son could end up saving me through his story.
Wow.
So we're here talking about purpose in life.
Yeah.
My daughter says it best. She said, our son, his name was Caleb, but his purpose in life was to bring our family, including her and me and my wife, back to Christ, to a Christ-centered relationship. So for over a decade now for me, I've just been on fire for Christ. And God showed me that he brought me along to be a leader, but he brought me along to be a spiritual leader.
So it's okay to get angry, to shout, and all that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in some ways when people tell me that, I say, well, at least you're talking to God, right? And the line of communication's open. As long as you're listening, you're going to hear something.
Absolutely.
Was there a moment amongst all of that where you just sort of surrendered? Or was it a like Tom's story, like I walked in and boom, I'm on my knees? Or did it take you just a little bit more time to get there?
It was a little more, but when I realized the fact that I just wasn't a spiritual leader to my wife and to my family, I mean, that hit hard. It hit so hard. And I dwelt with that. I just dealt in that issue for about 2 weeks. So I finally said, I got to give it all up to you.
And you've been a leader in so many other areas, and you were succeeding in all those areas, but it was that realization, this one area I've fallen short, and my wife needs me right now. And then you stepped up.
Absolutely.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing
you.
that. I know it's difficult to always sort of go back and through all those hurts and those pains, but when there's something good that comes out of it, redemption out of all of it, God sent his own son, and you said it here just a second ago, but God sent you your son so that you could realize that who your real father is through all of it.
No doubt about it.
That's
Romans 8:28. All things work for good. At one time, I would have punched you in the stomach if you said that to me during the ordeal, but
yeah.
I understand what that purpose is now.
Well, I'm glad you were not going to punch me now.
I wouldn't
appreciate
have
it.
done that.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Next up we have Scott Adams. We've got some pictures of Scott here. We can show those. He's a employment lawyer. He works with LeBar Adams, and he's married to Ann. He has 2 kids, 2 stepkids. Served in the Army also, and was a Persian Gulf War veteran. Way to go. So appreciate you being here. Again, we got law enforcement. I mean, I didn't work it out this way. We got law enforcement, and then we have a lawyer. It's all coming together in some way. We need a judge here next week and to make it all work together. But we appreciate you, and just appreciate everything that your family does here with this church. You went from a greeter at the side door, and now you're serving at the Dream Center.
Yes.
And Thursdays, do a prayer walk, go around and pray with some of the families. And your family's been attending there on Sundays. We miss you, but you're there for a good reason. I know that. You've heard all these the other stories of men who have sort of gotten to that moment of realization. And in some ways, many ways, yours is very similar to that also, isn't it?
It is. I was saved on March 23rd of 2006.
Wow.
I was 35 years old at that point. And interesting, my life was marked up until that point in time by, if you looked at it and you looked at the evidence of it, it was marked by drunkenness, fornication, lying, stealing, adultery. Like the drunkenness would be, I would get arrested numerous times for drunk driving. I would ruin, events. You would find me in different places. And, I would sober up and I'd say, you know what, I'm done with that. This is it. This is the end. I'm done. And by the end of the week, I would be, drunk again. The lying and the stealing would be, I would get paid cash for jobs that I might do. But, you don't report that on your tax return, do you? I mean, isn't that why you get paid cash? I mean, isn't that why
Okay.
people do that under the table? Things like that. That was the things that my life, looked like overall. And that all came ahead in my life on March 23rd of 2006. I was divorced, unemployed. I had no money. In fact, I was on vacation, a vacation provided by the great state of Florida, with very nice accommodations known as 33rd Street, which are prior to.
Oh, that's the theme that's connecting all this.
This is
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
And I was in 33rd Street, not as an attorney, but as a guest at that point in time. And while there, I was there for 4 months. I was there on another alcohol-related charge and 2 violations of probation, the 2 DUIs I had before that. And while I was there, like they were bringing AA meetings in there, church was coming in there, all these things were going on. And I was in there, like the old fighting spirit came back into me, like, this is it. I'm tired of this. I have to live a different life. I can't live this way anymore. And I remember I got down to see the judge, the video judge. You do it closed caption back then. You used to do closed circuit, I mean. And I go down to see the judge, and I stand in front of him, and he tells me, Mr. Adams, if you plead no contest, we'll give you time served. And I said, he goes, I want you to think about that. I said, okay. I get up, I get in line with everybody along the wall in my jumpsuit and my slippers. And, the door, we walk through. I'm making my way from Horizon down to the Mods, which is different housing units. I get about 2/3 of the way down there, and the thought comes to my mind, well, if I plead, I can get out, and I can drink and live like I had been living. And then all of a sudden, the weight of like all my actions came bearing down upon me. Like all the things that I had done, the breaching of all of God's moral codes that I knew, and even codes of my own conscience that I had done. And I got into the Mods, which is like a barracks type situation where there were bunk beds. And I got to, so there's about 15 bunk beds on either side. There's all these men in there. And I got to my bunk, and I dropped to my knees, tears running down my eyes. And I just said, Christ, I'm yours if you'll have me. And cried out. I was done. I had nothing left anymore. And on that day, I became his, and he became my Lord and Savior.
What caused you to do that? What was the prep before that got that into your mind that you could actually surrender yourself on your knees and he would accept you?
Throughout my life, I had encounters, I would say, with different individuals. My grandfather gave me a Bible, which I still have to this day. And he would talk to me about it. When I was in the military, I had a chaplain who came to me and spoke to me about the gospel and gave it to me. And if you looked at my life, it's much like what happened on Calvary, right? It was a lot like, for a large period of time, I was the person who walked, the passerby, right?
Yeah.
I was the passerby, and I would, at Christmas, I might look over at Jesus at Christmas. I might look over maybe at Easter. And eventually I became like the criminal on one criminal on the cross,
Right.
where he, says, if you are Christ, get yourself down, and us too. And I didn't really care whether he got down or the other one. Usually when I was making those pleas, it was get me right so I can keep walking the way I'm walking.
Right.
And eventually what happened was I became like the other thief, where he pleads.
Yes.
He pleads, Jesus, remember me when you enter your kingdom. And
I love that prayer that you said, if you'll have me. Well, the answer is yes, of course. No matter how broken you were. And in a shameful situation. I mean, you're in prison. But he was going to take you, absolutely. And we realize here that you could even be a police officer, right? Or you could be on the other side, the criminal, and he'll take you, no matter what.
he did. And he took me on that day, and he changed me, who I am. He gave me a new heart. He took that alcohol away from me, root and branch. I haven't had a drink of alcohol since that day. He gave me a new heart that loves him, a new heart that loves his word, that we study it every morning, a new heart that loves the people, his people, like in greeting, and that loves the lost, that I would go out and serve in the community to bring the gospel. I want my life, and my life is a testimony to what he has done, not anything of my own.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Our stories are similar, and we don't have a lot of time to get into mine, but I'll just give you some of the highlights. Mine was similar, dealing with alcohol, got arrested, and in Van Nuys, California, and for DUI, and put myself before the judge, and I realized that if I pled guilty before the judge, that it was better. And that little theme stayed in my mind for the rest of 1985, as I had a friend who had become a Christian, and he was sort of introducing me to all these thoughts. And I kept saying no. But finally opened the Bible for myself, read Matthew 1, was on my knees by the end. Matthew 1, all I knew was Matthew 1. And I said, well, that's enough. And I surrender. But that whole idea of getting before the judge was an important key in my life. And also my sinfulness. The Holy Spirit kept reminding me of my sinfulness and saying, you don't have it all together. You have fallen short. And I couldn't appease that voice until I had actually surrendered. The voice then went away, and it was taken care of. And so, that's another desperate situation. I mean, we're both here to testify to that. At the end of our rope, what are we going to do? We plead, and he says, I've been waiting for you all along. He's the father of the prodigal son, waiting to embrace us and take us into his arms.
Receive the pardon.
And receive the pardon. So, what a great story. Thank you for telling us that. And for many of you listening today, maybe one of these stories resonate with you also. And you're maybe at the front end of that, the beginning stages of it, and you're saying, what am I going to do? What does Christ want to do with me? Can he accept me? Does he love me? And the answer, I think, is clear from today, is yes, yes, and yes. And he will receive you. And you have to get to the point, and pride was a theme we saw all throughout all of our stories. Pride is the theme. You have to get to the point of humility and humble yourself. It's not weakness. None of these guys that were here today are weak guys at all. They're very strong in their field. They have a strength that doesn't come from themselves, but it comes from the Lord. And so you have to admit your weakness, and you have to surrender. And as a result, there's a wonderful story awaiting you. And that story does not end. It continues on and on for eternity if you would just surrender. So I hope that you would do that this message today would resonate in your heart. You continue thinking about it. If you have any questions and you want to know more about that relationship with Christ, go to that email at prayer@ourfamily.church. And we'd be happy to follow up on that and contact you. And we hope today that you've realized that there's more to you than your story, that you can live beyond yourself of what Christ has in store for you. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow night for worship at 7 p.m. Bye-bye.